Such a friendly gesture now. Just keep me out of the freezer and don't give me a cold shoulder, 'cause I am just a fragile can. Whoa. And you could crush me, crush me, crush me with your hand. So just tap me with your finger and I'll understand. So just tap me with your finger, I won't overflow again. I'm not who you think I am. Whoa. They call me sort of pop can man. Whoa. 'Cause I don't do well with pressure. It's such a friendly gesture now. Just get me out of the freezer and don't give me the cold shoulder, 'cause I am just a fragile man. I'm a castle made of sand. Here comes the tide again to wash me out to sea again. I'm not who you think I am. Whoa. They call me sort of pop can man. Whoa. 'Cause I don't do well with pressure. Such a friendly gesture now. Just keep me out of the freezer and don't give me the cold shoulder, 'cause I am just a fragile can. Whoa. And you could crush me, crush me, crush me with your hand. So just tap me with your finger and I'll understand.
Is life and death a false dichotomy? I'm not sure. It doesn't seem like it. Even though it's used in different ways, when it's used, it's a false dichotomy. You're either dead or alive. When it's used metaphorically about spiritual life, whether you have spiritual life, it's seems like you either have it or you don't, like you're saved or you're not. And then being dead or alive seems like the same case. It seems that way to me. Ow. Ooh. Hey, buddy, come on in. Just chilling. Let's see. Are you bored? Come on in, man. It's an open room, an open topic, but I'm gonna pull up scripture. Oh, my mouth is sore. That was such a good show on the Advent Defense League, I thought. Let's see here. I could go over. I have like this. What do you call it? I have the link is pinned. Anybody can join. Oh, you're driving. Okay. Let me pull. Share my screen here. One thing I think is cool to do. See if I can do this. Oh. Let's try this. There we go. Oh. Oh. Why isn't that coming up? Here, this should work. There we go. Like that. There we go. Yeah. You can pull up two Bibles at the same time. I kind of stole this from Edwin. Let's see. Yeah. Hit Revelation 13. And then do. This can be often very helpful to see them side by side. Speaking pompous words, which is the same thing as blasphemies. And you can kind of see the correlation between how it's talking about the same thing. Let's see. Let's go with this. Let me do this. Did I cancel it? No. So a good resource for that I really like to use, that I like to show people is it's called the TSK. It's free online. It's the Treasury of Scriptural Knowledge. I'll just give a little showing of some really good resources, and you can access it for free right here. This is like the greatest study reference thing you could ask for. You can get it gives you the books in chronological order and their dating. It's kind of an old dating, but it's pretty good. A conservative dating of the books in order for a timeline. But it has like, I forget how many cross references are in here, but like, let's say you want to let's go to 2 Thessalonians 2, for instance. These are all cross references to connected scripture connected together. I love this resource. So like when you go to, let's see. Let's go to I'll do a better one. 1 Thessalonians 4. I go to like those which prevent those who have fallen asleep. You go to that. With the trumpet of God, the archangel descends with the trump. We'll take you to Exodus 19. And it came to pass on the third day in the morning that there were thunders and lightnings and a thick cloud upon the mountain. Isaiah 27:13. Everything that has a reference to trumpets, basically, and the resurrection. 1 Corinthians 15, the trumpet shall sound and the dead will rise. Revelation 1:10, on the day of the Lord I heard a trumpet. Revelation 8:13. Anyways, it cross-references everything. You could go to, let's go to Revelation 14. This is cool. Let's see. Are you guys seeing this? It's pretty small, huh? Let me see if I can zoom in on it, make it bigger. Okay. Throw in a verse you want to see cross references in the chat if you want. This is just a really great reference. Like if you go to, like especially with Daniel. Let's see. Let's see what comes up for like a mark, the mark of his name or whatever. Let's see. Anyways, sorry, I wasn't preparing anything, but another really cool reference that is not free. That's cool though, that I really found that's neat. I guess that I would recommend is Nave's, the new Nave's topical Bible study. So you can just look up a word in the English. Like if you go to, just say, let's like, they were talking about the mark of the beast. So if you go to like forehead, type in forehead, look at the references. So we have, and it's not just that word in English necessarily. It'll cover the underlying word. So even if it says like frontlets between your eyes, that'll be a reference too, because it's the same underlying concept. So, and it shall be a sign upon your hand and a memorial between your eyes, that the Lord's law would be in your mouth. And it shall be upon Aaron's forehead, that Aaron may bear the iniquity of the holy things, which the children of Israel shall hallow in their holy gifts, and shall always be upon his forehead, that they may be accepted before the Lord. For he is bald, but he is clean. Speaking of the forehead, about the priests. Thou shalt bind them for a sign upon your hand, and they shall be frontlets between your eyes. Deuteronomy 6:8. 11:18. Shall lay up the words in your heart and in your soul, and bind them for a sign upon your hand, and be as frontlets between your eyes. And then it brings in a bunch of other references that for that concept, right? Revelation 7:3. Do not heal, or saying, hurt not the earth until we've sealed the servants of our God in their forehead. It was commanded then they should not hurt the grass or the earth or neither any green thing until they have the seal of God in their forehead. Mark in their right hand or in their foreheads. those who had their father's name written in their foreheads. This is just really cool reference to concepts you can connect just by putting in the word. You can do this with like temple, and it breaks it up in really, so like you get every reference to temple. And so you can go, okay, there's tons of them obviously, but if you go to the New Testament references, you look at, this is all the first temple and then the second temple references, and then figurative and New Testament references. So like figurative is the first one, of course, Jesus and his body, which I brought up. If you're still there, Prepared Adventist. No problem. Hey, Stefan. Hey, buddy.
Hey, how's it going?
Good.
Yeah.
The reference to the temple is really interesting. You can just look at all the way Jesus in 3 days. I am able to destroy the temple of God and to build it in 3 days. And in saying that, they destroyed the temple and built it in 3 days. Save thyself, if thou be the Son of God, come down from the cross. John 2:19. Jesus answered and said, destroy this temple, and in 3 days I will raise it up. And then it talks about the references where we're the temple of God. Anyways, it's a really cool reference. It even mentions idolatrous temples. I'm interested to see how they included the way they characterize them is interesting. They have Herod's. Anyway, it's interesting. Ezekiel's vision. I'm wondering if they include the references in Hebrews where they put that, or how they categorize that. I don't remember. Anyways, all right, I'm done with that. Cool. I would recommend Nave's Topical Bible Study, and as a general reference, and Treasury of Scriptural Knowledge, which is free on many different places online. Also, yeah, what's up, man? You have any topic you want to bring up? What's on your mind?
Well, I mean, yeah, I have tons of topics, but most people don't like my topics. So, what do you want to talk about? Free grade?
Whatever.
No. I don't know.
Whatever you want.
What did you have in mind? I mean, you bring up a topic.
Let's see. I didn't have one in mind.
How about the Olympics? Did you see the opening ceremony?
Yeah, I kind of expect that sort of thing, so it doesn't really bother me that much.
Yeah,
I just expect it. I don't really make a big deal out of it because I don't consider the world as to be part of the church. So I just kind of expect it, I guess, not to be like down about it or whatever.
Yeah, I mean, it's like, I mean, on the one hand, it's like there's no real point in being like offended. Like you say, it's like you can't handle that. You can't handle much. I mean, people mock stuff all the time. But it's just bizarre how they had the white horse on the waters and the nations and everything. It's pretty symbolic.
Yeah, like I've pretty much already accepted that. I think is what it is my opinion would be something like, I expect there to be an outrage from general Christianity and the pendulum to swing back that way. And so I expect kind of like a pseudo Christianity to come back, and then essentially that system to bring in the system that prompts the second coming, I guess. So I kind of expect it. So they've got to offend everybody in order for them to want to make America Christian again, which I don't disagree with per se. I don't expect it to go well, I guess. But that's my interpretation of the Bible. So.
Yeah, but I mean, think about it. They had, okay, the white horse, the nations, they had this thing flying in the air, which I guess was supposed to be the sun being blocked out by smoke, like in Revelation.
What's
So
that?
it was very, very biblically symbolic. And so, like, why would you do that? I mean, like, for no reason? I mean, it doesn't make any sense. There had to be a reason.
What's your theory? Hey, Jason. Yeah, it's open. You want to join? I'm just talking about whatever. That was a really great stream you guys did. That was awesome. I loved it.
What was it?
The Advent Defense League, my Adventist brothers, I have a show called On the Advent Defense League where they talk about different Adventist doctrine, and they had another guy who has a big channel, Tila, and they were talking about the three angels' messages that we preach. It's the end time message for the world. And then they talked about hell, which I love because I hate that doctrine with a passion.
Yeah, you did a great job with that one guy. That one guy, he pretty much says it's annihilationism.
Yeah, they brought up a bunch of great verses I always forget. Like, well, what's your interpretation of how do you look at the whole Revelation thing? I didn't hear about all those details you were mentioning about.
Oh, shit, all you had to do, that's what I'm saying. All you have to do is watch it. And you see, like, okay, all the nations are on the waters. And that's what the waters are. The people.
Oh, in the background? Was that the background kind of thing?
No, I'm saying they had all of the athletes, all of the nations going down the river on boats.
Oh.
Yeah. And in Revelation, the waters that you saw are peoples, nations, and tongues. So, and then they had this white horse going on the waters. So, I mean, you just use the symbology. You know what the white horse is, you know what the waters are. And then,
yeah, it seems like someone was claiming it was like a Dionysius thing, but then other people were saying, no, they were using biblical imagery, and they're probably trying to showcase it to make the zeitgeist argument, probably. But I'm an Adventist. I'm an Adventist. Are you shocked? Stefan.
what do you guys all like? You have meetings and.
Well,
but I noticed on your channel, you're still talking about, I forget something, but something
Daniel?
about Daniel. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm trying to kind of get Adventists to see what I'm talking about, because I didn't really get it from an Adventist source, but I don't know, just from studying the calendar. And when I bring this up to Adventists, they're like a little bit confused sometimes, some of them, not everybody, but like when I say something like the Hebrew calendar, like, so we have the prophetic calendar in the text, and it also seems to be present in Noah's day, a literal 360-day year in Noah's time. That's the way it's presented in Genesis. And I tend to take that literally. So it appears that, and there's actually other evidence that cultures that go way back, and we look at and they were no slouches on following the celestial bodies and keeping calendars. Like, they knew what they were doing. They were quite advanced. And there's a lot of cultures seem to have a 360-day year calendar way, way back that were very advanced. So it does seem to appear that perhaps the original year was 360 days long, and maybe like after the flood, it changed. But what is also clear is that when Daniel was writing, and even prior to Daniel, we don't really know a lot, at least I don't. But we do know historically from archaeology and history, and what the Bible suggests is that, and we know when it could go pretty far back with the way the Jews kept the calendar and how they're told to sight the moon month to month. And we know moon cycles are not exactly 30 days. And if moon cycles aren't exactly 30 days and you sight the moon for your month, and we know, so they don't actually have a 360-day years when Daniel wrote in time, right? In like, so from year to year, you can't say there's X amount of days in a year, because the moon cycle does not, what's the word? It's not like there's an exact amount of lunar cycles in a true year. And by year, I mean the cycle of the seasons, which is the earth going around the sun. That's a year, a solar year, right? It's a cycle of the seasons that starts over each year. And it says in Exodus 13:10, you shall keep the Passover in its season, from year to year is how it's translated. And it's what's interesting about that is the word there that's translated to year is actually yamim to yamim, which is the word for days, day plural, yam plural. So if you did a word for word translation, it would be, should keep the Passover in its season, which is important, right? Because the Passover is attached to the Feast of Weeks, when they did the wave sheaf offering, which is obviously associated with the crops, which makes sense that it would be in its season because you have to grow your crops in the season, and the lambs only make babies in certain months of the year. So to have a lamb and to have the first fruits to take to the offering in Jerusalem has to be in season. And so any calendar that claims to have an X amount of days, the same amount of days every year, would be false if you're going off of the moon, because the moon cycle is 29 and a half days long approximately. And so we know they made adjustments. And so and Daniel knew that when he wrote. And so to me, that proves that when Daniel wrote, and then we know from Jewish history and even until today that they were making adjustments according to the sighting of the moon. And then they add a 13th month, which means no year from when Daniel wrote till now had 360 literal days in a literal year. So what do we do with that? Daniel knew that because when he's in captivity, the Babylonians knew that. We know this. We know when Daniel wrote it that the Jews had to make those adjustments, and they were a luni-solar calendar. Month to month, it goes by the sighting of the moon, which we know wasn't 30 days every lunar cycle. So when Daniel's writing, does he know that? Obviously, yes. So when he says time, times, and half a time, and then mentions the 1260, which then we know what the New Testament writers thought about that with the 42 months, speaking of the same period, those can't be literal increments of time. Now, they're literal time prophecies that correlate to actual history. But what does that mean? It means Daniel knew when he wrote it. And by the way, Ezekiel, who says a day for a year in his writings, he was a contemporary of Daniel. And he wrote that, a day for a year. And it's double emphasized in the original Hebrew. And that means like an emphasis, like when it says, for instance, like when it says in our translations, like he'll give you perfect peace. In the Hebrew, that's written as shalom, shalom, right? And so in the King James, they put perfect in italics, and he will give you perfect peace. But in the original, it would be shalom, shalom. Or if you translated it word for word, it would say peace, peace. But that wouldn't really convey it to a Western mind. So perfect peace, like an emphasized peace. And day for a year is double emphasized in Ezekiel, who was a contemporary of Daniel. So in other words, what my point is what I was getting at is this interplay between year and day in the text and Daniel's knowledge that a literal calendar in time didn't have 360 days per year. So he couldn't have been thinking it was literal increments when it was talking about days. In other words, there's other reasons why that doesn't make sense too, but that to me proves, how can you say those time periods are literal increments if the writer knew that a literal year in his time when he was writing, and we know Jewish history, never had that amount of days in it? He knew 1260 days wasn't how many days were in 3.5 years. And so when he writes it, he knows what he's doing. He's saying they're symbolic increments for whatever reason. And so it must mean, like the 70 weeks aren't days, the 1260, which are 3.5 years on a lunar calendar, but he knows they didn't use a lunar calendar. To me, this is definite evidence or proof that he wasn't thinking literal. But every other position in today, whether futurist or preterist, the preterist has to make them literal days because they need it to be over with, so they need it to be a shorter amount of time. And the futurist says it's a short amount of time in the future. But Daniel had to have known that he wasn't talking literal increments. He's talking about stretches of time, which follows the pattern of Daniel 2 and Daniel 7, talking about hundreds of years and kingdoms spanning time without one after the other. So to me, this is a really good reason that it's not literal. Anyway, there you have it. Wow, you're
Okay.
patient.
What?
I said, wow, you're patient. Sorry.
Yeah,
I'm sure I'm passionate about it.
yeah, I'm not interrupting and trying to talk my own story.
I mean, do you get what that makes sense at all? You get what I'm saying?
Well, I mean, it shouldn't be that complicated. I mean, I couldn't follow it.
Okay. It's cool.
But
So what's your view about hell?
hell? Oh, I believe in the annihilation.
Yeah, I'm a bad advocate maybe because I'm kind of harsh about it, but I'm just so I want to I'll tell you a secret. I desperately want to influence other Christian groups because I know I'm not going to make everybody agree with everything, but if
Well,
I
which
can
one?
if I can influence and worm my way into evangelicalism to get more people to believe in the reality of what the Bible teaches about hell, that pleases me.
Well, which one are you? Annihilation or the other
Yeah.
one?
Annihilation, that is the real one.
Yeah. Yeah.
I am not I do not lie. I want to be an influencer wherever I can to make people not think God tortures people forever, because I think that's, if anything, I mean, people go around saying add Ellen White to, a demon. It's like, if you read the woman's writings, dude, how can you say that if you're a converted Christian? Like, you can disagree with her or say she's wrong or misinformed, but like, to say she's a demon is sick. It's just perverse. Like, okay. And the same thing. So I would just say, people will say the most awful, terrible things, and is what that makes me want, how that makes me want to respond, I guess, in my flesh, is to say, you think our view is so terrible, and like, but you're gonna say God. I like, look, the Bible doesn't teach that God tortures people forever. Have you ever stopped to realize? And then they say, well, you just don't believe the Bible. No, I just actually believe the way the scriptures were written. Have you ever gone to the references that Revelation's writing? Do you realize it's a genre of literature? Do you realize what they're borrowing from? And you go to that in Isaiah 66 or Isaiah 34, and you look at this imagery that they're borrowing as it's talking about all the symbolism, and then you just can't realize what the Bible's teaching. I mean, it's embarrassing. And so it's like every single verse about hell proves that it's annihilationism. Every single one.
Well,
When carefully studied.
You did a bunch of live streams with that one guy. What does he say about torture day and night forever and ever?
Okay, let me pull it up. Because this is the one people get hung up on. A couple in the book of Revelation. I'll bring it up.
I already know the one, like, your smoke will ascend forever and ever. I can figure that one out. That's fine. I get that. But the day and night thing, I'm wondering about.
So yeah, let me pull it up real fast and we'll just look at it real quick. I'm not sharing it.
Whatever it was, I mean, just could have been anything. Say it was a log. You throw the log on the fire and it turns to smoke.
He shall be tormented with fire and brimstone in the presence of the holy angels and in the presence of the Lamb, and the smoke of their torment ascends forever and ever, and they have no rest day or night who worship the beast in his image, whoever receives the mark of his name. They're thrown into the lake of fire. Jason brought, thanks for the donation. That's awesome. Appreciate that a lot. Thank you. So they brought this up tonight too. And so if you go to Isaiah, let's see. Isaiah 34, I think it was. Talking about God's day of vengeance. So look, it says, the streams will be turned into pitch, the dust into brimstone. Its land shall become burning pitch. It shall not be quenched night or day. Its smoke shall ascend forever. From generation to generation, it shall lie waste. No one shall pass through it forever and ever. But the pelican and the porcupine shall possess it. The owl, the raven shall dwell in it. And he shall stretch out over it the line of confusion and the stones of emptiness. He shall call its nobles to the kingdom, but none shall be there. All its princes shall be nothing. So this is obviously what he's talking about. So what does this sound like? A place? Sounds like the earth. First of all, happens on the earth, and it's talking about the destruction of the wicked places, or the judgment of God on the earth. So, and there's like, after he says it'll be burning forever and ever, the smoke shall ascend forever. It will not be quenched night or day. It'll lie waste from generation to generation. No one will pass through it forever and ever. But then he says, but the pelican and the porcupine shall possess it. So in other words, he's going to make the place of the wicked a destruction, and it'll be a wasteland or a wilderness. So he's going to turn the place of the wickedness and those who live in wickedness into a wilderness. In other words, he's going to just, so that's where that imagery comes from. Look at the words. They'll become burning pitch. It shall not be quenched night or day. The smoke will ascend forever. No one will pass through it forever and ever. This is clearly where he's getting the imagery from.
Okay, so what chapter and verse is that?
It's Isaiah 34.
34.
Starting essentially in verse 8.
All right.
And then there's all these verses, like, I love the one he brought up too that I hadn't thought of, but I think it's like, listen to this in Proverbs. There's so many verses that say, look at this one. I'll go through the verses that talk about the destruction of the wicked. Let's see, where was it? Was it Proverbs? I think it was. Let's see. Maybe I got it wrong here. Maybe it was something else. Looking for it. It was a really good one. Anyway, I'll find what I remember here. Let's see. One of my favorites is this one that no one knows about, seems like. My friend brought it up to me a while ago, and it's my favorite one. But Obadiah, it's one chapter. Listen to this. For the day of the Lord upon all the nations is near. As you have done it, it shall be done to you. Your reprisal shall return upon your own head. For as they drank upon my holy mountain, so shall all the nations drink continually. Yes, they shall drink and swallow, and they shall be as though they had never been. They'll be as though they had never been. Someone's like, well, yeah, it's like, no, they will be as though they had never been. It's talking about them. They shall be as though they never were. Kind of like, I'm going to make it so like before you were born, sort of idea, right? Other good ones, I think, are like, and they brought this up too, it's one of the best ones. In case you're not, this one, I love the way Jason was saying it too. It's because I agree. I kind of copy him. Soon they'll be cut down like grass and wither like a green herb. Trust in the Lord, commit your way to the Lord. For evildoers, let's see. He says, for yet a little while, and the wicked shall be no more. Indeed, you will look carefully for his place, but it shall be no more. So look, the wicked won't be, which is to be is to exist. They won't be anymore. And then in case someone says, yeah, because he's going to transfer them to metaphysical la la land, which I guess isn't part of God's creation because God promises to wipe all evil from his creation. But if you want to, even if you like, okay, I'm going to posit this metaphysical idea of this place that isn't being mentioned here, which is dumb, but okay. But then he says, indeed, you'll look for his place, but his place will be no more. So there's no place for them. A place for the wicked? There won't be a place for the wicked. He'll turn it into a wilderness. So you're not going to see, there won't be wicked people, and there's not going to be a place for the wicked. They will be no more, and a place for wicked people will be no more. It won't have existence. There's not a place. They won't exist. In case you're stubborn, there won't even be a place for them. That's how I read that. I don't know how else you could be more clear. And then Ezekiel 28, specifically talking about Satan. It's the rebel who was created beautiful, and then he opposed God. He'll be thrown down to the pit. I cast you to the ground before kings. That imagery is unmistakable. It's the final judgment of the wicked. He's going to throw him down before kings and the mighty men and all that stuff, right? He'll bring a fire from the midst of you. He's speaking from the past as though it's a future event that's already happened. This is well attested by scholarship. It devoured you, and I turned you to ashes upon the earth in the sight of all who saw you. All who knew you among the people are astonished. Who is this man? Other verses say, they'll say, like, who is this? This is the man that deceived the nations, this cast down one. So it's like they're going to gnash their teeth when they realize they're part of this following Satan. You've become a whore, and you shall be no more forever. You shall be no more forever. No being anymore, olam, forever. And making them ashes. What does that sound like? Sounds like Malachi 4. The promise of God, what he's going to do. He's going to rid his creation of all things that don't belong in it. He's not going to make a place to keep mortal beings immortally alive. He only offers immortality to the redeemed. He doesn't offer the wicked of eternal life. They perish. They die. It'll come to pass in the latter days. Let's see, that's the wrong one. Malachi 4. Behold, the day is coming, burning like an oven. All the proud. Who does that sound like? All the proud. Yes, all who do wickedly will be stubble. They will leave them neither root nor branch. Now, last I checked, that's the whole thing. You can either you can be rooted in Jesus, or you can be rooted in Satan. You're either with me or against me. Your branch is your person. There's no root, there's no branch, there's no soul, there's no immaterial soul that can defy what the Bible says about the fate of the wicked. Nothing's left. That's what that means. You'll be stubble. Oh, that means you'll be a little ghost man burning and dancing around. No, it means you won't exist anymore. You won't have being anymore. They shall be ashes under the soles of your feet. He's going to burn up the wicked. He's going to do away with it. No more wicked. All gone. Devour. I mean, I like to say it like this. The fire will devour the wicked. They'll be consumed. They'll vanish away like smoke. They'll melt like slugs. There'll be ashes under your feet. There'll be neither root nor branch. You'll look for them, but they don't have being anymore. You'll look for a place for the wicked. You won't find it. It doesn't have any being anymore either. It doesn't exist anymore. They're going to be like they've never been. It's going to be like before they were born. It'll be like that. It'll be like they never even existed. Now, if they're writhing in pain in metaphysical la land, is that like they never were born? Is that like they faded away or vanished like smoke? That there's no place for them? That they're ashes under your feet? That they've melted like slugs? They've faded like grass? I mean, how many ways does the Bible have to say it before you believe it? Anyway. What do you think? Yes, Amber, good to see you. Let me like that comment. It's almost like it's uncreating them. It's restoration, right? Yeah, I was talking about the day of the Lord. Sorry, I wasn't looking at the chat. Yeah, good to have you. Let me just do something here. My special friend here. Okay, so yeah, I'm really passionate about this because I really think saying God tortures people forever when the Bible is very clear. I don't know how many other ways it could be clear. Yeah, it's an open stream if anybody wants to join. Any other thoughts you want to add?
Who, me?
You're studying Hebrew, so yeah, it seems like they won't be anymore. You never shall you be anymore forever. I just don't know how else he could say it. I mean, I know people will say this, I'm not talking about Satan, but I take a conservative view that the Bible is God was behind all of it. So it's telling a narrative throughout the whole text. I see a chiastic structure to the whole Bible. And I think Jesus reflects that when he talks about is in the days of Noah. It's kind of a chiastic structure. He's bringing us back to Eden, and it's pivoting on the cross, the pinnacle of time and space. God restores already, but not yet. Looking forward to the kingdom when the sons of God put on immortality at the resurrection. Then death wears thy sting. And then we work our way towards the heaven coming to earth. So now, do you have that view? Do you believe that behold, the tabernacle of God is with man, right? So that to me sounds like Jesus is coming back to the earth to restore and be the king of heaven and earth forever from the earth as the ultimate image bearer and representative of humanity. Do you think that people, what's your view of the resurrection? I forget.
Yeah, I'm not a soul sleeper. Sorry. I mean, the resurrection. I think I remember you kept saying something about the last day, and I think you're right. I mean, I don't know what you said, but the last day, I would say, is the day of the Lord. So maybe you're not technically resurrected until the day of the Lord, but at the same time, you at least on that path.
Yeah. So somebody wants to say, let's see. Somebody wants to say there's a difference between not believing in a resurrection but believing in a resurrection and believing in a conscious intermediate state. I get it. Yeah, but I think people should affirm the resurrection. I think it's clear. I mean, we know what the story.
Even say, I think it even says in Revelation, the return of Christ this is the first resurrection.
Right. Revelation 20, right. Yeah, the cycle thing is obviously true, right? If you study Hebrew, you're gonna see that. The day of the Lord has some application to Jesus' first coming, but I think it's also like I see it as the millennium. I'm a premillennialist, but I'm a historic premillennialist, and it's a very different premillennialism. It's kind of unique. Adventists, right? We believe that there is a future millennium, but we don't think it's on Earth, which I know people have a hard time with. So we have things in common with amillennialists, but we're not amillennial at all. So we believe the millennials, there is a millennial kingdom. It's just not on Earth. We think the Earth is going to rest for 1,000 years because there's all this language about Jesus, the day of the Lord. It seems like it's at least that's the coming of Jesus, the future day. So it seems like he comes in judgment and it's a fierce day, but there's all these events that have to take place. So I kind of look at it like the day of the Lord commences at Christ's coming and the resurrection of the dead, but he's also, Jesus talk about the day of the Lord. They'll be eating and drinking, giving in marriage until the flood came and swept them all away. And he warns, like, be ready so that day doesn't take you like a thief in the night. That's a warning of judgment. So the Lord is judging now, and then he comes and his reward is with him to give to every man. So I see that as there'll be the mark of the beast in the time of trouble, and all those whose names are not found written in the book of life are made to worship the beast, all kindred, tongues, and nations, if their names are written in the book of the life. So Jesus comes, and then he executes, and he separates the sheep and the goats. So he sends forth the angels, Matthew 13, and they gather up everything to be burned, which fits a lot of the Old Testament imagery, the day of the Lord and the judgment. Like when Jesus in Luke 3 reads from Isaiah 61, he's like saying, he's doing all these things up into the middle of the second verse. And it's like the day of vengeance of our God, he leaves out. I mean, he doesn't read that part. He shuts the book. And he's like, today, this scripture has been fulfilled, but not the day of the Lord in his judgment. So I think it's really significant that that's in the text. Whoever put that in Luke, wasn't thinking, I mean, how do you make that up? If the gospels are made up, that Jesus leaves off the day of vengeance of our Lord. Obviously, did that really happen? If he really did that, how could the early church have been like, could he be a failed apocalyptic prophet if he purposely left that part of the verse out? Think about that. And that's recorded. And if the people making up the story, but then people will say they were expecting Jesus to come back and then he didn't, so he's a failed prophet. Well, then I guess they would say that they added that to the text after that. But it just really doesn't make sense. It's really interesting. I think there's little details like that you really just can't make up. But interesting. I'd like to hear about it, Amber, sometime. So I think, anyways, so I'll run this at you to see if I can convert you here, first and last. I'm joking, but kind of. This is the verse everybody brings up, right? Absent from the body is present with the Lord. So I would just point out, I'll just skip to the last slide to show my kind of chart here. Oh, so you can see the key at the top. I would say the context is clear here. He's saying he's contrasting the mortal body with the resurrection body at Christ's coming. So he's groaning about being in his mortal body, and he's looking for his resurrection body, which comes at Christ's second coming. And so the blue represents that. He's looking, we know we have a building from God, a habitation from heaven. Oh, cool. That'd be great, Amber. Yeah, I'm interested. So I would say you can kind of follow the chart. I think he's contrasting the mortal body with the resurrection body, and he teaches elsewhere that that's at Christ's coming. So when you look at it from heaven, so I think Jesus comes from heaven to the earth at his second coming. That's when the resurrection happens. So his habitation from heaven comes at the return of Jesus, which is the blessed hope, the return of Jesus. And then he says, having been clothed, we shall not be found naked, which would be without a body. The spirit leaves the body, you'd be dead. So in this tent we groan, being burdened, but not because we want to be unclothed. So he literally says, look, I'm not talking about being without a body here. I'm not talking about being naked. I'm not talking about being unclothed. I am looking forward to my habitation from heaven, the permanent building from God. So he's talking about the body, which is the house of the spirit of life that God gave to Adam, right? He breathes into the body, the spirit of life, and Adam becomes a living creature. And so he's using that idea, and he's saying, look, our earthly house is fleeting. It's temporary. It's transient. We know that it's not permanent, like the tabernacle in the wilderness. It's like the word oikoterion maybe is used here. I forget. But he's saying he's looking for that permanent building, the resurrection, immortal body. Notice what he says here in verse 4. For in this tent, this temporary mortal body, we groan, but not because we want to be unclothed or without a body, but further clothed that mortality may be swallowed up in life. That sounds like death wears your sting. This mortal puts on immortality. This corruptible puts on incorruption. So what is he looking forward to? Well, he's looking forward to the blessed hope and the glorious appearing of the Lord and Savior Jesus Christ, which at that time he gives us who are alive and remain are transformed, and those who are dead are raised. And we together we meet the Lord in the air. Then we shall be with the Lord. So he's talking about he's begroaning this mortal coil and looking forward to the return of Jesus. And so what does he say? We are confident and well pleased rather to be absent from the body, meaning this current body that he's been talking about, and to be present with the Lord at his coming. I mean, it doesn't say to be absent from the body is to be present with the Lord. He said, I don't want to be naked. I don't want to be unclothed. I'm looking forward to Jesus coming with my immortal body, and I prefer that rather than this or death. I don't want to be naked. I want my new body from heaven, and I want Jesus to come back. So he'd rather be in the presence of Jesus with his new body than to be absent from God in this body, which is why we live by faith and not by sight, because we're not present with the Lord, but we look for his return. So I think the context and reading it, how it actually is said. And so the last thing I'll say is, it seems like it's something like this. If I'm on a road trip away from my family on business, and I'm anxious to get home to my family, and I'm here, say I'm 3 states over in a motel, finishing up my business trip, and I said something like, I'm looking forward to being gone from here and present with my family. In other words, he's just saying, look, that's what he's looking forward to. He's not saying, as soon as I give the key to the guy at the motel, I'm instantly back at home. No, he's saying, this is where I want to be. This is where I am now. So that's what I would say. Any pushback on that?
No.
I just wonder why people always have to misquote this verse out of context and say, to be absent from the body is to be present with the Lord. Well, it doesn't say that. What is the context? What does Paul teach about elsewhere? I know he says he's between the two, to stay with you or to depart and be with the Lord. But does he ever actually teach that you go to heaven when you die? I don't think so. I think it has to be inferred. I just don't see it anywhere. It's an assumption. It's implied, and people read it into it. He doesn't actually say that. And when he teaches, because it seems like, what would the blessed hope be? To die and go to heaven. But the blessed hope isn't dying and going to heaven. The blessed hope is looking forward and being ready for the return of Jesus, the glorious appearing of our great God and Savior Jesus Christ, because he's going to execute judgment. And he's just getting that from Jesus, right? Jesus says, look, think about him in John 14 to the disciples. He tells the disciples, his inner group, after he gets rid of Judas, he's like, look, I'm going to leave. I'm about to leave and depart this world and return to my Father. And he's like, look, you believe in God, believe also in me. In my Father's house are many rooms. If it wasn't so, I would have told you. I go to prepare a place for you. But if I go, I will come again. And what does he say? Where I am, you can't come where I'm going, but I'll come back for you. Oh, there's Amber. Oh, I'm excited. Hey. Hey there.
Hey, is that working? Oh,
yeah.
Can you hear me? Okay.
Yep, sounds good.
Awesome.
So tell me what you told the description. Great. How are you? Good to talk to you.
I'm doing good. Yeah.
I can go any text you want if you want to go anywhere.
Well, I don't know. Are you talking? Because I'm better with Old Testament. I'm an Old Testament major. That's what my focus is. So that's more what I look at. And Day of the Lord's one of my favorite topics because it's, as a prophets major, like we deal with it all the time. So it's one of my
example would you give? I can pull it up. Yeah.
Oh boy, I'm trying to think because it's I don't know. We can go to Ezekiel. That's my favorite book. Let me see which. I mean, the whole thing is about the day of the Lord, but and it depends in which chapter you're at, which part of the day of the Lord it is, because the day of the Lord is so nuanced because it depends on if you are a follower of God or if you're not. And there's places where sometimes Israel is called his people and sometimes they're not called his people. So they're on both sides of the day of the Lord. It gets really complicated.
There's judgment on Israel on the day. Mm-hmm. And there's some passages that seem to correspond with Christ's first coming is what I would say. But then there's somewhere, sometimes they bleed into each other too. It's like it's like you can't really separate it.
Well, and if you look at the narrative of the prophets and what the prophets are wrestling with, is this question of who are God's people. So, because there's this whole back and forth between their unfaithfulness and breaking of the covenant and their faithfulness in following the covenant. When are they dwelling with God? When are they not dwelling with God? And depending on which state they're in, they're either on the good side of the day of the Lord or the bad side of the day of the Lord, or when the kingdoms split and Israel goes off on their own and Judah tries kind of to follow God, then you've got, the whole thing is split in half. And so you've got people on both sides. So Who are the people of God? And that's what all of the prophets in those from Isaiah to Malachi, they're all wrestling with the question, who are the people of God?
Yes. So I'll just give you kind of my, people will say I'm replacement theology, and that never made sense to me, but I've come to understand what they're saying. I would say, I'm always like, what do you mean? Because Adventists so I look at it like Jesus established the new covenant with the Hebrew people in the first century. It's an already but not yet. So it's their church is how I look at it. It's not the same as the Mosaic covenant, but it is established by Hebrew people for Hebrew people. Now, then the question is, how should we read how literal do we need to take? Should we read unfulfilled Old Testament prophecies through the light of the new covenant? Or how literal should we separate that? And so that's kind of like a dispensational versus covenant theology sort of thing. I'm just curious what your view is.
I'm much more of a covenantal, but that's just because that's the way that I went through when I went through prophets class last semester. I mean, I started out with a very different view than I ended up with, because the guy who taught it really pushed us out of where I was comfortable. And we talked a lot about visions and dreams and the ways that that God communicates with the prophets. And there are a bunch of different ways that happens. Sometimes it's God speaking directly. Sometimes it's God using spirit inspiration. Sometimes it's through visions. Sometimes it's through dreams. And when you get into vision dream language, it gets even crazier, because some places, like in Ezekiel, you'll see, and Daniel does this too, their visions and dreams are spoken about differently, mainly because one, you're awake, and one, you're asleep. But in Ezekiel and Daniel, we see them having visions in their dreams. And there's I can't remember what, and it's like, wait, he says, and I woke up, and then he keeps talking in vision, and you're like, wait a second, he's having visions in his dreams. This is really crazy, because it's, God is speaking in a vision, in a dream, and you're just it gets really, really funky if you get too literal with it. So we talked about, like, you have to be careful when you're dealing with visions and dreams, because, and I want to be kind of careful with the way I word this, because I don't want you to misunderstand what I'm saying, but visions and dreams are something that happen outside of what we define as reality. It is a space where God is communicating something that is a divine message. And so we have to be careful not to be too literal with something that is a divine message, because the imagery is going to dictate what that is going to do. And if we're too literal in reality with something that was given divinely inspired outside of what we consider reality, it can get us off in the wrong direction. And so we have to be very gentle with visions and dreams. And when you're looking through, and a lot of times when there's the really important, not that it's not all important, but the most important emphasized parts, there's always an interpretation given by the messenger. He'll always tell you, this is what this means. And then the stuff that we have a little wiggle room on, they don't always interpret for us. It's kind of left to our understanding of scripture and our interaction and study and inspiration from the Holy Spirit as we are learning and growing in that process, that kind of helps guide us with the rest of the stuff that's not directly interpreted by scripture itself.
Yeah, what comes to mind would be something like, Joseph's dream, right? Or the head of gold is Babylon. It gives you or the three things represent, what is it in Daniel? I'm trying to think of Joseph's dream or whatever, but the three cows, the cows
that come up, and there's the seven, there's the seven fat cows and then the cows come out of the water and eat the fat cows, and that's the lean cows. And then you've got the heads of grain that get eaten by the dead heads of grain. Yeah. Then they tell you exactly what those dreams mean. They'll interpret them for you. Or even Revelation, the angel will at certain points tell him, this is what this means. Like, when scripture really wants to be clear, it will tell you exactly what that means. And it doesn't leave a lot of room for guessing.
Me and my friend did a thing about the imagery in Revelation, like about the lake of fire. It's like the lake of fire is the second death. That's an interpretation. It's like nobody ever says, or like another really good one would be, and the angels bringing up the incense to God or whatever. It's like, this is the prayers of the saints. We don't say, oh, well, maybe we can go backwards the other way and say, well, if you want to pray to God, you have to burn incense. Nobody argues that. But then when you get into imagery about hell and it gives you parts of it interpreted, the lake of fire is the second death. So that's an interpretation. It's not like all of a sudden you can flip it around. It's really weird. But yeah, I absolutely agree with you. When it gives you the interpretation, you got to go with it. Other parts are not so clear. I don't have a problem with looking at, polemics in some cases. But I think we have to be very careful with that too. But like, they're going to see visions according to their context in their culture to some degree. And so to deny that is just like being scared, I think. And they're not seeing a movie as the future. They're giving imagery, which means something real.
Right.
It's not necessarily seeing helicopters and giant monsters coming out of hell. It's like, no.
Right. Let's jump to Ezekiel chapter 1, because that's one of my favorite places to go for talking about this, for visions and dreams and interpretations and how it gets really fun. Okay, so we're starting out here with Ezekiel chapter 1. And one of the things I love about this, like verse 1, he is very specific for, this is the time, the month, the day, like where he's at, the location. He is very specific. And what that does is, in our minds, that takes us to where Ezekiel is. So if you look, he's at the river Chebar. That's in Babylon. So Ezekiel is hanging out in Babylon. He's been deported. He's already there. So we know King Jehoiakim he's already in captivity, so they're gone. And you've got Ezekiel, God comes to Ezekiel the priest. And so we're like, okay, that's not supposed to happen. Because in this mindset, the original readers of this that are getting this from whoever wrote Ezekiel are going to be looking at all that stuff going, River Chebar, wait a second. Okay, he's in Babylon and the word of the Lord came to Ezekiel, wait a second. Because in this period of time, in their minds, there is this unbreakable, for what they think is an unbreakable tie between the deity and the land. And so God stayed in their territory. And now Ezekiel's out of God's territory because he's been deported. He's out of Israel. He's in Enlil and Marduk's territory right now. So as we're going down, we just keep going through. So you see this storm language here. They're reading this and they're like thinking, this is Enlil. This sounds an awful lot like Enlil because it's all these imagery that's used for them. And then if you keep scrolling down, it's just this whole, then you get the wheels and the creatures with you get all this. This is all imagery that is pulling you back to the Mesopotamian pantheon, the Babylonian pantheon here. And then all of a sudden you get in verse 25. Oh, wait, maybe it's up a little further than that. You get into about 24, 25. And then you get this voice in the vault from over the heads of the lowering of the wings in 25. And then you're like, wait a second. That's not what happens in this interactions with Enlil and Marduk, all this, that imagery. And then bam, verse 28. The appearance and the likeness of the glory of the Lord. So you've got this, all of a sudden, this isn't Enlil. Yahweh is showing up. This is a repeat of what we saw in Exodus, where he overturns the Egyptian pantheon. We're getting reminded of the Exodus story here. God's not where he's supposed to be. What is Yahweh doing in Babylon? That's crazy. In this mindset, these readers are going, this is not supposed to happen. But then we also, in this point,
almost like he's coming out of the storm god's appearance, almost in a way, or something.
It's like you think that it's this, but it's going to take you in your mind back to Genesis 1, and part of the cycles of creation, part of the imagery there is God is claiming all that space. So you've got the light and the dark. God is claiming this is mine as he's completing that day and creating it. And then he's claiming the land and the waters. And so God has from the beginning, Genesis 1, claimed everything. All of it is Yahweh's. And so here we see when he's overturning this to say, this isn't Enlil, this is Yahweh. Yahweh is saying, this is not Enlil's land, this is my land.
Totally.
End of
Love it.
story. God is claiming Babylon. God is claiming back his people. God is saying, I am the big dog here, not Enlil. So it's
This is like contemporary with Daniel, but slightly before, kind of, right?
this is Ezekiel and Daniel kind of overlap. But they're in different parts because Daniel is up in the north and Ezekiel's down in the south.
Okay, yeah.
Mm-hmm. So they're in different parts. They overlap, but Daniel was there for a long time, and we don't know about Ezekiel and how long he was there because it's not as specific in his book.
Daniel's like in the kingdom or in the palace,
Yeah.
sort of, right? And then
Yeah.
Ezekiel's like with the people.
He's down south with being a priest with the people. Yeah, and then you get
This kind of reminds me too of Daniel, right? Like Daniel 7
Mhm.
or 8, when it
Mhm.
very specific, kind of like even the way it's recorded in Genesis when the flood comes and all that. It's very particular, like with the dating, which is kind of interesting.
Yeah. Well, and if you look at when you step back and you look at the Old Testament here, I'm just talking Old Testament, okay? You've got creation to day of the Lord, which is a cycle of completion that hasn't been finished yet. If you, from the whole way it's described in Ezekiel 37, and you start talking about the reestablishing of Zion, you get this imagery of the temple and all of the rivers coming out of the temple, and that is something that Revelation pulls that out, and it like it does, the New Testament is reinterpreting after Christ what the Old Testament is saying. So it's not, I don't think, stopping and restarting. I think it's just nuancing it again, because you get Torah and then the prophets, and they're addressing what's happening in that period in the 7th and 6th centuries, are reinterpreting what's already in Torah for Israel. How do we get back to God? How do we stop this from happening? They don't do it. They get deported. They go spend their time in exile, and they get brought back. And it just they still are still hard-hearted. They still haven't refocused. Where then we just wait, and then the Gospels tell us there's someone that's been coming that they've been talking about from Genesis 3. Guess what? Here's that someone that's coming, and they reinterpret Torah again. And then
like John 5, you see Jesus dealing with that in John 5 and John 6, and that's why I take that covenant position as like undeniable. Jesus is calling a remnant at that time. Not just, I'm not a preterist, but I would say at least not in some ways I am, but not. As I've already shown, or by what I believe, but
Can I ask a
Jesus
question?
isn't forsaking Israel. He's setting up already, but not yet. That's how I would say. And Go ahead, first class. Go ahead.
So when you were going through that class, what did the class say about Ezekiel chapter 1 chapter 1?
In regards to what exactly? I mean, that's kind of the recap of what we talked about how the imagery there and the wording and Ezekiel is trying really hard to describe with human language that is never going to be able to express what he is seeing. So you've got a human in this thing, this unfolding, where he's being given this vision, and the poor guy is doing the best he can to describe in faulty, broken human language a divine thing that our brains can't even comprehend. So a lot of times in these vision imageries, they are doing the best to try to explain what is being given to them with whatever these creatures are that Ezekiel is seeing. Like, this is the best the poor guy can do to explain it. And you get to, I'm trying to remember which verse it is, but it gets to where Ezekiel, the best he can, he's like, this is awesome. I mean, he gets to where that's all he can say is that, because I can't even imagine like what Ezekiel is actually seeing there, because it's so outside of our experience and outside of our normal and outside of our human existence, that there is trying to communicate that in Hebrew or Aramaic, or however you want to do that. It has got to be extremely difficult for these prophets to convey that message in a way that is something your brain can't even. I mean, I've never seen personally that I know of an angel in its full, heavenly form. I could imagine I couldn't even describe it myself. So, these guys are doing the best they can with heaven, describing heavenly things with earthly language. Yeah.
And some of it, it's hard to like detect what is like has some sort of. A lot of it seems like it's pregnant with meaning that may be symbolic, but I take it to be a literal seeing of angels and stuff. But some of it seems to be like when the eyes are all around. I can't help but think that as imagery of like the watching angels is what that says.
Well, and if you think about it, because the word for, we talked about it. The word for that's used as the eyes there is the same thing that's used for. Isaiah is. Isaiah, the almond tree. Where is that? I'm not as good at Isaiah as I am. So, but it's the same, because the word for watching and the word for almond there, those two words for the. I'm trying to remember exactly. I'm not very good at chapter and verse exact references, because it just. I'm not as good as pulling those out of my head. I'm better with just the imagery and the story. But the Hebrew there, those words are almost identical, but they're a word play, because there's just one sound different between the two. So you're supposed to, every time you see an almond, remember that God is always watching. God is watching over Israel all the time. He sees everything. God is always present. And it's the same word that's used with the eyes on the wheels. So it's another reminder for them of the words of Isaiah. God is watching. God is present. So,
yeah. I kind of wonder if it's, my view is like I think there's all the settings of like a sort of like a courtroom setting, the divine counsel idea. I take that to be relevant to what God is doing in the whole problem of evil, and kind of like he's demonstrating something to the heavenly host and to us. And that's kind of my theodicy, is this it's like a great
whatever Ezekiel is seeing here is gonna like amazing. Like, I can't it's but he is seeing things. There are creatures that represent something there, and the best he can do is it had something that looked like the face of an eagle, and something had the face that looked like an ox, and something had a face that looked like a lion. Was it exactly those things? Maybe, or maybe that's the best he could do. Of it looks a lot like a lion, but it may have not have been. It may have been something that looked like it. Yeah.
It sounds kind of like the progression of kingdoms in Daniel, but I haven't really studied that very well, so I'm not sure.
I don't know, but
I'm
not sure that I would make a one-for-one comparison there, because you've got two different visions in two different time places in two different locations. And so the message to Israel, the message to Judah was to turn so you don't get wiped out. And then the imagery there was imagery of warning. And Ezekiel is getting this. They're already gone. The land's already gone. They've already been destroyed. The temple is not quite gone yet, but it's about gone. So they're in a totally different situation in those two scenarios. And so
Yeah, you're right. It's probably
it,
some has some meaning with the different beasts or whatever have some sort of symbolic meaning in that's related to what you're saying. I'm just spitballing. I don't know. I need to look at the things people have. I don't remember what I've read about that. I know people have offered a few different ideas that I've read, but
there's when you get into Ezekiel, the scholarship goes bonkers because it depends on, again, it depends on how literal you get with vision language, which you have to be extremely careful with being too literal with it, because if you get too literal with it, you're taking something that was given in a heavenly vision, in a heavenly language, outside of our dimensions of our reality, and you're trying to translate that into, so you're trying to go from binary computer code to, interpretive dance. So it's,
yeah.
do
you accept polemical nature of God using imagery of other gods, and how much are you going to be willing to suggest or think that may or may not be an option? I think I've opened up more to that, but I think people overdo it. And then it's like, but depending on your presuppositions that relate to the issue and how you want to look at it. So yeah, I don't have any hard opinions on that here, I guess, but yeah.
Right. Well, it depends too your view of apocalyptic, because apocalyptic is the same, but it's also a little differently nuanced. In the Old Testament, apocalyptic is dealing more with it's the main eye is on what's happening in front of them, which is the impending destruction of Jerusalem, the impending destruction of the temple, but because they're in that mess, there's also a side target of someone who's coming to fix this mess. But their main focus is on the Assyrians and Babylonian armies that have come in, and they're going to wipe out the north, and then they're going to come wipe out the south. That is their main focus. But the someone who's coming to fix it for everyone for all time is a side target on the horizon that we are supposed to also be keeping our eye for, because the prophets get very specific about who is coming, and they're going to be a prophet, they're going to be a priest, they're going to be a king who does only the things that Yahweh can do, which that combination in that system in the Old Testament is impossible. So the Messiah that's coming to fix it is going to be so impossible that it's going to be, you shouldn't miss it. But they miss it because it is so impossible. You can't be a priest and a king. It's just not, it just doesn't work. Priests are from the line of Levi. Kings are from the line of Judah. They have very different jobs that are never supposed to overlap. So it's the one who's coming is so set apart that it's impossible that you're not going to miss him, but they miss him because he's so set apart and impossible. And the Gospels take all of that prophecy, and Matthew is huge on this, and go through a lot of the prophets and go, look, here he says this, here it says this, here it says this, here it says this. All of these are Jesus. And that's why, especially like Matthew is so heavy in prophet language, because he is showing them how they missed it and how they misunderstood what the prophets were saying about the one who is coming to fix it. Because Jesus is a prophet, Jesus is a priest, he is the king, and he does things only Yahweh can do. So he is the one that is coming to fix it.
Amen. I agree. Yeah, I'm gonna have to close it down, but I would love, Amber, to please message me, and I would love to feature you to just come on and talk more about this sort of thing. I would really love that. So if you're interested in doing that, let's set up something.
Yeah, I'll talk Old Testament all day to anybody who cares to listen, because this is like what I love, this whole stuff.
Yeah. So last, I'll give you whatever you want to say, and then Amber, I'll give you a last word. And thank you guys for coming. I really enjoyed it.
All right, that's it, man. Good show.
Oh, Eric, you're late. I'm closing down. What's up, buddy?
Hey, brother, how you doing?
I just had my Amber, who I've kind of gotten to know on other people's channels, like Warren's channel, and we both just got christened with wrenches on Trinity Radio. I was pretty, I felt pretty good about that, and so she's been really nice and supportive, and she has a lot to offer in her studies. So I was just getting to know her for the first time on here, and it's good to see you, though.
I'll tell you what, I just I've been doing some things with the wife this evening, and I just popped in to catch like the last 15 minutes of your guys' discussion, and I was fascinated. So I just want to say it's awfully nice to meet you, and hello, Jamie. God bless you, brother. It's good to see you again.
Yeah, I'm so glad to see you.
Yeah, and what's so fascinating to me is that the very discussion that you're having at the very end here, well, you've touched on so much of the very things that I was considering and contemplating and praying on last night. And have you guys ever heard of Jacob Prasch? I'll just be a second.
I like Jacob Prasch. Yes, I've interacted with him, and it's been a long time, but yeah, I really do enjoy him.
Yeah, I just happened to catch a Jacob Prasch thing yesterday, a new video that he put out, and part of it was a very older video, a much older video of him preaching on Nahum chapter 3. And as I was listening to it, it occurred to me, because it's been a while since I've read Nahum, how much Nahum chapter 3 reflected what I thought was Revelation 13 and 17 and 18. And I had read Nahum chapter 6 and noted the same thing, that it was very reflective of the book of Revelation. And so the Lord has shown me like something through this that just astounded me last night. And it was, you guys are just like hitting all around this stuff. So I was just fascinated. So I want to say, in a nutshell, I enjoyed your conversation, brother. I wish I would have caught more of it.
Well, that's what I'll do is I'll probably do another one tomorrow night, and so just watch for it if you guys can join. That'd be great, and we talk about it more. But thanks for stopping by. I look forward to doing that. Any last words, Amber?
What time are you doing that tomorrow? I'm doing a live stream with another channel from 9 to 10 Eastern time on Habakkuk, and because we're going through the book of Habakkuk.
Cool.
And
what channel is that?
It's on Church Under a Rock.
Okay.
Seen that one before.
Put it in the chat, since you can do that since you're in the.
Okay. Yeah. Let me pull that up real quick. But yeah, we're going to be talking about Habakkuk, and then after that, I can jump on depending on what time you're gonna.
Yeah, I'll chat. If you put it in there, I'll schedule around that.
Okay.
If you can't make it, you can't make it, but I'll schedule around that to keep that in mind.
Well, I'm in Toronto, Canada at the moment. I'm on the East Coast visiting family, but I'm normally in Pacific time, so
really?
Usually works. So yeah, usually works a little easier than that. But I need to do it over here. So yeah, I'll be here from 9 to 10 Eastern, which is 6 to 7 Pacific, tomorrow. And then after that, I think we're in the hotel until we're leaving tomorrow. So I can jump on anytime after that, like after 7:30, it's like 7:30-ish Pacific time.
Great. Yeah, I'll definitely schedule around it. Just you guys can find me on Facebook if you want it. Jamie Reinking, REINKING, if you want to message me. But or just leave a note on my or you can. My email is messed up right now, so the easiest way to get a hold of me is on Facebook Messenger. But or ask Warren, he has my messenger or whatever. If you can talk to him. But cool. Thanks for coming, you guys. God bless, and I'll see you tomorrow.
All right, thank you. This was fun.
Yeah, it was great to meet you.
Oh.
Shot through the heart, and you're to blame.